Hello, everyone. I'm Brandon Marcello. This is the Auburn Undercover Roundtable. Thanks for joining us. Joining me, as always, is Auburn Undercover publisher Ronnie Sanders, recruiting analyst Keith Niebuhr, and the one and only Phillip Marshall, the Dean of Auburn Writers. Guys, Auburn coming off a huge season opening win, as everybody knows, 21-16 against Washington. A game that the outcome's not surprising, obviously. We kind of figured it'd be a tough back-and-forth game. But for me, just my general thoughts, we'll go around the table here. I thought Auburn was pretty dominant in that first quarter and a half and probably should have been up 2 or 3 touchdowns instead of it being so close.
I thought they certainly had an opportunity to. I'm sure Washington also says, man, got inside the 10-yard line 3 times in the second half and didn't get the 3 points. I thought that the biggest thing about the game to me was that is winning the game when it came down to it. I think that was very valuable for Auburn to the game's on the line and they go and make the big drive and win the game and then make the big stop and then run out the clock running the ball. I thought that really more than anything else stood out to me.
Yeah, that really helps the team, and you saw it in 2013 with Auburn. You know, they have to come back against Washington State, hold them off, and then obviously the touchdown pass in the latter seconds against Mississippi State, and that really became their kind of MO the rest of the season, especially, of course, as we knew, against Texas A&amp and then big time against Georgia and Alabama. They learned from that, and they continue to win that way. And maybe Auburn, when they get in these close games, they can do the same exact thing they did against the Huskies this weekend.
Yeah, I thought it was an outstanding game, and I've heard people say, well, Auburn's offense didn't do this, and the secondary struggled here. And while that's true, it almost seems, and I don't know if you guys agree or disagree with me, but it almost seems like sometimes people forget who you're playing. Yeah, who you're playing is going to dictate a lot of what you can and can't do. I mean, I know that sounds so basic and so obvious, but I swear it seems like people forget that these days. As a matter of fact, I was reading on ESPN.com the takeaways from all the top 25 teams, and some of the teams were the words were very glowing. And then, I looked to see who they played, and they were, football championship subdivision teams. Well, I mean, you can't tell anything from those games. Guys, it's hard enough to tell what kind of team Auburn's going to have and what kind of team Washington's going to have. There's still a lot to be written, as Phillip would say. And but yet we know that there are a lot of guys on these two teams that are going to be playing on Sundays. We know that these coaches have proven track records, and we know they have returning quarterbacks that can play. So I just thought it was an outstanding win where there were highs and lows like there are against any good team you play. I mean, this wasn't Charleston Southern. This wasn't Wofford, and no disrespect to those schools, but this was a legitimate team with a lot of guys that are going to be playing on Sunday. And quite frankly, we're going to find out a lot about Washington next week when they play Utah. But this, it looks like a team capable of winning 10 or more games. I think it's a very good win.
Well, you're exactly right, Keith. And one of Pat Dye's favorite sayings was who you play has a lot to do with how you look, and there's no question that's true. And I think some of the opinions have been extrapolated from some of these blowout games, or I don't know how you do it. Just like you're not going to get anything, you're not going to learn anything much about Auburn Saturday night.
Well, what's going to be not funny, but what's going to happen here in week 2, there's a couple more big games. And then you're even going to see some of these teams that had huge week 1s that play lesser opponents that maybe take, quote-unquote, a step back, at least on the scoreboard, and you're going to have analysts overanalyzing that as well. Happens every year from week 1 to week 2. We always tend to forget that. We always talk about the huge overreactions for week 1, but there's just as many in week 2 because it usually goes the opposite way for a few teams.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any question. And if you ask most coaches, they'll all tell you that you make the season-wise, you make the most improvement between game 1 and game 2, no matter what it looks like on film. You get a lot more corrections after week 1 than you do after any other week. So I agree completely. There'll be a lot of overreaction after Saturday.
And with the way that game ended, guys, we all watched it, of course, but Auburn struggling to run the ball. Washington's defense had a lot to do that. Obviously, there's still some things for Auburn to figure out up front with its offensive line, just as far as even chemistry and communication. But I think what was really impressive about this victory for Auburn is not only did they do it and hold them off in the latter seconds, but on third down they decide, let's go ahead and just run the ball. We see something we like here, and let's give it to Jartavius Whitlow, who's only had 6 carries the entire game, has played less than maybe a dozen snaps. Let's put him in this situation, and boy, did he deliver. I thought that was quite the crunch time spot, and he even mentioned his heart was racing when they told him to go on the field, and he knew the play.
Yeah, I mean, not only 6 plays in that game, 6 plays of college football, or 6 carries. I mean, that's the first game he's ever played. That was amazing to me. It's those kind of things, kind of like the all-out blitz that basically ended the game. You look like a genius if it works. If it doesn't, you don't look so good.
Yeah, I liked Kevin Steele's explanation there. It's just like, we're going to end the game here. With the time that's remaining right now, you go all out, and if they score, well, you got some more time on the clock for your offense. If you kind of lollygag around and drop some guys and let them pick up a first down and extend things, you give your offense less time. So let's just go out and end the game right now and blitz them. I like that.
And they did. He never had a prayer.
Never.
I thought the Whitlow play was fantastic, but also I have to say it does bring to the forefront. On the one hand, it's great. Hey, look, ran the ball third down, big touchdown run. On the other hand, I think the fact that they would go to that shows you that in the red zone, Auburn's passing game, even though they got the Canella touchdown early in the game, it's still some of the same issues. Now, granted, this was a good defense they played. There's no question about that. But some of the same issues are rearing their head with the inefficiency to get the ball in the end zone in the red zone. Perhaps this will open things up with the passing game. I don't know, but it was an outstanding play. He's a hard runner. There's no question about that. When you look back to his high school film, he played multiple positions, but the one thing he always did was run hard and run until he couldn't run anymore. So credit to the whole team on that one. But again, as somebody who, we've watched their red zone inefficiencies, I keep thinking, they really do struggle to get passing plays in the end zone, in the red zone. So that's something I'm going to be watching closely the next few weeks. Obviously this week it shouldn't be an issue, but moving forward, you wonder if they can get that kind of fixed a little bit.
Yeah, they've really got to run the ball. They really got to run the ball.
Yeah. According to Chip Lindsey, Missouri. That's what happens when you get old. You call Washington, Missouri. Washington was dropping a lot of people in the red zone. In fact, if you look at the winning touchdown, there weren't many people in the box, and he really wasn't slowed down until he got to the safety there about the 3-yard line and ran over him.
Yeah, I mean they knew exactly what to do in the red zone to kind of stifle Auburn. It's almost like, in basketball, unless you have a big receiver back there to throw, the ball into the paint, so to speak, against the zone, it's hard to bust that zone in such a tight space for the football team. But they did it with Sal Cannell, high pointing the ball earlier. I'm interested to see just what kind of tweaks maybe they make just with the passing game in the red zone, in addition to, they want to run the ball better, which they're going to have to. But credit Washington's defense as well with that. I mean, I was very impressed by the job the offensive line did in pass protection. They only gave up a few pressures. And with those RPOs, what people forget is that people see a pass, they go, well, there was only 36 passes or whatever it was. Well, no, with those RPOs, there's actually more drop backs, so to speak, even though he's not dropping back, that they're rushing the passer. Jarrett Stidham bought time, and I was looking at some analytics from Pro Football Focus, and think what you want with them, but just as far as time to pressure, which is the amount of time Jarrett Stidham was able to, one, get good pass protection, but also extend the play himself before throwing the ball away or even completing a pass. It was the second best mark in the entire SEC this past weekend, which is saying something considering all the low-quality opponents that SEC teams played this past year or this past week. So I think that's a very positive sign for the offensive line and pass protection, but I think the one big thing they got to work on, obviously, is some run blocking, even though, as I said, they just went up against a top 5 rush defense from last season with a lot of returning starters.
I think that's one of the reasons I think the end of the game was so valuable, because they won the game and ended the game running the ball. And they ended the game running the ball when they knew they were going to run it, and they still did it. And I I thought that was very important. And I don't know. Steve Spurrier was a genius at throwing the ball into the end zone in the red zone, but I don't know many teams that are very good at throwing it in there in the red zone.
Virginia Tech looked pretty good against Florida State.
Most teams want to be able to run it in. Well, they went seven straight possessions, 3 and out. So at the first quarter, but I think it's just hard to do. And Steve Spurrier, like I said, was the best at it I ever saw, and I've heard a lot of other coaches say that too.
Yeah, he was phenomenal back when he was at Florida. You couldn't stop it.
All right, guys.
Speaking of red zone plays, if I could just, Brandon, the best red zone play of the day for Auburn that nobody's talking about was Darrell Williams. I think that the tip pass on the
incredible.
That was just that guy was wide open for Washington. That was just such an amazing play.
Yeah, you and I were sitting in the press box and we saw that and it was just like that may have saved the game right there. Everybody talks about Nick Coe's strip sack, but that play, I mean, he was wide open, and if he's not streaking across the field, busting his tail and putting that arm up, that may have been game over for Auburn.
And he's got the great length, and you wonder why on an outside backer sometimes you want a little extra length. It's not just to get to the quarterback. I mean, if Darrell Williams doesn't have those super long arms, I mean, boy, he barely got that ball to begin with. That was just a hell of a play.
He is an underrated player. He's a really good football player, and not real well known, I don't guess, nationally, but he's a heck of a player.
Well, that entire Auburn defense played their tails off, and I think it's a great sign for defensive line depth that, they had 5 sacks total, 4 by defensive linemen, and all 4 by the defensive line were by different players. A lot of good rotation, a lot of guys stepping up on different spots on the field, and I don't think there was anything prettier than those final 3 plays on Washington's offense. They dropped Myles Gaskin for a loss, then they bring the blitz on 2 straight plays, and that very last one, I mean, Jake Browning, as soon as he got the ball, he was dead to rights.
Yep.
So, guys, I was talking about week 1 overreactions. I wanted to talk about LSU a little bit because LSU is Auburn's next big game after this Alabama State game, part of this 4-game homestand for Auburn. LSU whips up on Miami, a game where the final score doesn't really show just how close it was. LSU didn't put amazing offensive stats up if you just want to look at the box score, but you watch that game, LSU just absolutely dominated Miami on both sides of the line, in the line of scrimmage, and that LSU defensive line is incredible. How much can we actually read into this victory by LSU, and is LSU a legitimate team that will be maybe in the top 10 when they actually come to Jordan-Hare Stadium?
I think it's somewhere in between. And I thought LSU was really impressive. I agree with you, but I'm a long way from being sold on their quarterback. I mean, been a lot of praise for him, but and he made a couple of good throws early, but he didn't really do a lot after that. And Miami has quarterback issues, and it's amazing what they got out of him last year. But they just didn't look very. I don't know what it was. They just didn't look. They didn't look like they were ready for the intense kind of effort you need in a game that way. I guess that's the way I would put it. It was like they kind of got knocked back on their heels and never struck back.
Yeah, they just. I thought Miami was overmatched in every way. I mean, as it was put to me by an SEC defensive coordinator, he said the dip and dodge defense was finally exposed. Miami couldn't do anything. And so I think, obviously they've got quarterback issues, but I don't think Miami's nearly as good as they're ranked. So, or as they were ranked. So I think LSU is probably getting a little bit more credit than it's due, but I also think LSU maybe is a little bit better than what everybody thought. So maybe a little bit of both. I
was surprised at how well LSU ran the ball. I was, they really didn't have a running back that had ever done anything. Yep. That surprised me a little bit. I wasn't surprised. I expected them to be really good on defense, and I think they'll be really good on defense at Jordan-Hare Stadium. And I was surprised by how well they ran the ball, and I was more surprised just at how bad Miami did everything. I mean, Miami and Florida State both, they did about every single thing you can do that is pretty guaranteed to lose you a game.
Yeah, Miami blitzed. Manny Diaz's defense blitzed more than 60% of the time in that game.
Isn't Manny Diaz the one that got canned at Texas after giving up like 500 yards rushing to BYU?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of coaches who aren't big fans of his or his scheme. So, yeah, same guy.
I'm going to take if I could just take the contrarian side here, you guys are going to eat me alive. But I actually, when I look back at that game, I wasn't, and I know a lot of these LSU kids, I covered them in recruiting, fantastic kids, good players. But, Miami, it's 3-3. Miami drives down, blows a chance to go ahead. Miami shot themselves in the foot so much. End of the first half, should have had the ball near midfield, 2 straight penalties. A lot of wide open guys. Let's not forget that. Miami had a lot of guys open that whole game. I think LSU had a couple of long runs. If you take those away, Joe Burrow under 50%, hit the same passes that all these other LSU quarterbacks have. Other than that, really didn't do too much to me. I think it's a little bit of fool's gold. They look like an 8-5 team to me. We'll see. I could be totally wrong, but I'm not buying that one at all. And I think Miami, obviously, like Phillip said, did everything they could do to lose that game, and I think that contributed it as well. I don't think it was the Miami got as pushed around as people were saying. Maybe I'm dead wrong, but that's the way I saw it.
Well, if they're
LSU's, yeah.
If they're 8-5, I think you're probably going to have a new AD and a new head coach down there. I don't think 8-5 is going to be good enough.
Wow. That's it's that one. Like I said, the biggest thing out of that game that surprised me the most was how LSU ran the ball, and I don't know. That's it. I would be shocked if they could run it that way on Auburn, but we'll see.
The right side of Miami's defensive line wanted no part of that LSU offensive line.
Yeah,
they were just getting pushed around. But we'll see here in a little over a week when LSU comes to Auburn for what will maybe be a top 10 matchup in the polls, and we'll get to see what LSU's really made of. I think Auburn's proven that they're a top 5 quality program right now after beating Washington. I don't know about LSU yet. I didn't rank them as high as other people did in their AP polls, just because watching that Miami team and their quarterback situation, that was not a top 5 team. And I was completely overrating Miami heading into this season. Now Miami's lost 4 straight games dating back to last season. Their defense has been soft during that time, giving up a lot of points, and LSU was just the latest team to do that. So it'll be interesting to watch. I want to go around one more time, guys, here. What other impressions did you get from teams across the SEC or even across the nation from this first weekend? Did anything else stick out to you?
Well, I thought Alabama, obviously, though, and I picked them to score in the 40s, which really they did, because one of the touchdowns was a kick return. So they scored 40-something on. But as I said, when I saw that Louisville had hired Brian Van Gorder, I've seen that show before, and looked quite familiar, actually. He's coached against Alabama twice at Auburn and Louisville, and given up a cool 100 points. So it didn't surprise me at all that Alabama scored like that. And I think, I heard somebody say that Alabama's going to put 50 on everybody they play. I don't believe that for a second. I did expect that maybe Louisville would be able to score more than they did, because Alabama lost a lot of people on defense. They had some guys hurt on defense, and they were still really impressive in that game. And so that obviously was impressive. Ole Miss is going to be hard to stop. Now, I don't know if they'll stop anybody, but they're going to be. That quarterback's good. They got really good receivers, and at least in that game, they had a good running back.
I think they got the best receivers in the SEC. Ole Miss, they're incredible.
Of course, Texas Tech, David Gibbs is the defensive coordinator at Texas Tech, and I've seen that show before too. So,
what did you think of Jim? What do you think of Jimbo Fisher's first start? I know it's just against Northwestern State, and they play Clemson this week. By gosh, but what did you think about them going to the pro style there and how that worked out?
I thought it worked out good against that team. We'll see against real teams. But I mean, I thought that they executed well, and maybe they'll be able to pull it off, and we'll see. I'm really curious to see that game this week. Not necessarily, certainly Texas A&M doesn't have to win that game to have a good team, but I'm just curious to see how their offense looks against that team. That's because that's a whole different scenario, obviously.
Well, Clemson may have to. Ronnie. Clemson may have to win that game because the way the ACC looked in Week 1, there may not be too many mulligans out there. You know what I mean? I'm not sure a one-loss ACC team is again, snap judgments, obviously, but Clemson, if they want to get in the playoff, I think they better take care of business this weekend.
I'd probably agree with that. I mean, I thought A&M, for a first game under a new head coach playing who they were playing, I thought they looked fine. I think we'll find out a lot more. I mean, it would shock me if they won more than 9 games. I think that'd be a pretty good. I think that'd be a pretty good year if they got to that number. What shocked me was how bad Florida State looked, and the mess that. I don't think that's all Willie Taggart. I think he certainly deserves some blame for it. But I mean, I had been hearing kind of the same things that the announcer said, that it was it was kind of a fractured program, that the players were fractured. It didn't look like to me that he'd healed a whole lot of the fractures. So it's going to be interesting to see how Jimbo handles A&M, and seeing if some of the things, is he going to have the same kind of success he had at Florida State, or is it going to, continue looking like 7-6 when he left Tallahassee? So I think that's one thing. I thought Florida, again, it was a cupcake opener, but I thought the fact that they were functional on both sides of the ball was nice to see. They actually had an offensive plan that worked, and I think for all of his personality flaws, Dan Mullen has done a pretty good job in the conference. I think you got to give him credit.
I'll tell you what, watch out for them. I just think they're going to pull an upset this year. They've got the talent, I think, and Dan Mullen always. I mean, he's really good with that offense. Really good. He's always scoring points. I've seen the guy take a tight end at quarterback and win 9 games at Mississippi State. So I'm very interested to see what happens at Florida throughout this season.
The thing that was shocking me about Florida State was, I mean, they just couldn't do anything on offense. I mean, not anything. And their defense really played pretty well. I mean, their offense kept giving the ball to Virginia Tech on the plus side of the field, and they kept stopping them for most of the really until they got stopped on one of the more bizarre plays I've ever seen in a clutch situation. The whatever it was when they snapped the ball directly to the running back, and whatever happened, but it ended up on the ground. And until then, Virginia Tech hadn't done anything on offense either since their first quarter. But Florida State's offense was just non-functional. It just might as well not. It was awful.
Yeah, whoever was calling plays for the offense must have picked out the uniforms too.
We can talk about the dysfunction within that program, but really, to me, the reason why Florida State is where it is for the simple fact that Jimbo was maybe a little too loyal to Rick Trickett, quite frankly, as the old offensive line coach there, and they took a lot of gambles. They didn't do well recruiting at offensive line. Guys didn't develop. There were a lot of misses, and what you saw was the result of that the other day. Now, against a lot of the ACC schedule, it may not matter, but they're probably going to have to line up and throw the ball a lot in a lot of these games and hope that Cam Akers can do what he did the other night by breaking a long run here or there. But they're in the mess they're in because that offensive line is absolutely pathetic. It would probably be one of the 2 or 3 worst in the SEC. And then, when Willie Taggart came in, there's 2 ways a new coach can do it. He can kind of buddy up to everybody, or they can go the opposite and run people off. And he went with the buddy up to guys. They play rap music in practices. They're trying to keep it loose. And, at the end of the day, you can do all those things and you can make the guys love you. But if you ain't producing, I mean, Ronnie, people loved Ron Zook when he got to Gainesville. He was accessible. He was rambunctious at booster functions, and if you're not winning at the level they don't want you to, you got problems. Now, the next thing, the other team that really my takeaway was the Tennessee's rebuild is going to be a long one. I don't care what anybody says. I'm not seeing a whole ton of talent out there. And
oh my God. I think you're right, Keith. I think you're right.
Especially at the quarterback position. Last year's cycle wasn't great, and this year's cycle, there's only a few guys that most people agree. The consensus is they're big-time players, guys like Bo Nix. And so what are they going to do? You're looking for a quarterback to turn a program around, and there may not be one at this time. And the fact that West Virginia was able at times to make it look so easy against them, and obviously that's a team with a veteran quarterback, a lot of good players, but West Virginia shouldn't kill Tennessee ever.
No, I mean, you look at the Tennessee's history versus West Virginia's history and access to players and facilities and money and everything else. I mean, Keith, I agree with you 100%. I think Tennessee's in for a long, long road. I mean, it's a mess, and it's going to be a long time before it's cleaned up.
All because they try to build a house brick by brick with a trash can. Am I getting that right?
Well, champions of life, though. They are champions of life.
Yeah,
well, let's
right.
not forget Derek Dooley either. And
oh, my goodness.
That.
Well, Dooley, never mind. Okay.
We'll get plenty of chances to see him, too, this year at Missouri. I'm really looking forward to that offense.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. So this week, what game interests you guys the most? For me, it's Georgia and Carolina.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's the conference game. Really, it's going to be whoever wins that game because of the way the makeup of the East. Whoever wins that game, it's going to be hard to keep them from winning the division. I mean, because they'll probably have to lose twice not to. And but I don't think it's going to be all that close a game myself. I think Georgia will handle them pretty well. I could be wrong, but what I think.
Yeah, I agree with you, Phillip. I'm looking forward to the game, but I think that I don't think it'll be that close.
It's pretty exciting if you're an Auburn fan or if you worked in the Auburn athletic department or hung around the Auburn athletic department, you used to see Jake Bentley walking around, coming and visiting Dad as a young high school player. And I know everybody's so proud of him. He's a fantastic young guy. But I ran into a Clemson person today, and the first thing they said was that, well, they don't have a chance. He's terrible. And he's far from terrible, by the way. He's very good. He is very good, but he hasn't maybe won that signature game yet. So is he going to have that performance? You guys remember when they beat Alabama and Steven Garcia had the performance of a lifetime? Is that what it's going to take? Because, I agree with Phillip. Georgia looks. I mean, forget about what they did last week. We know the pieces they have. We know they've got a lot of the pieces back from last year. Yeah, they lost some guys, but the way they've been recruiting, they seem to be on the same page. It just seems like it's going to be a tough game. It's going to take a Herculean effort from Jake. Does he have it in him? I know there's a lot of people in Auburn pulling for him. A lot of people across the SEC too that would like to see Georgia humbled a little bit.
Well, I think he's a really good player. I have not bought in that he's an elite quarterback, not yet at least. And I just think Georgia's got, if you just compare the two teams, Georgia's just got better players than they do for the most part. Not everywhere, but for the most part. Now, Georgia goes up there and puts it on the ground 2 or 3 times, all of a sudden it's a whole different deal. South Carolina could win, but I think it's going to take something like that. I don't think that South Carolina can just line up and beat them straight up. And because Georgia's not going to get caught looking the other way in this game. They recognize this is a big game, and they will do all they can to be at the top of their game.
Hey, going back to Auburn real quick, guys, do you think Auburn's going to, quote-unquote, figure things out with the running game? Do you think that was just more or less Washington's defense slowing Auburn down? I mean, they still got 147 yards, and they ran the ball effectively when they had to late in the fourth quarter, but are we going to be able to see, a situation where Auburn's got a 100-yard back more times than not?
I think it depends on who they're playing, obviously. But the times I talked to J.B. Grimes during the summer, he was very confident that they were going to have a good offensive line, but he wasn't real confident that they were going to have a good offensive line on September 1st. And I think it's a matter of the offensive line, getting more in sync and those things. And I think Auburn will be able to run the ball. I don't know if they'll average 250 yards a game or something, but I think they'll run it. I thought that Washington was really good, was part of that, but part of it also was guys sometimes not running the right track, sometimes offensive line not communicating, all those kinds of things that you would hope would get better over the course of time. So I've never seen a Gus Malzahn team that couldn't run it, so I'm going to guess that they'll be able to run it effectively.
That's what I was about to say. I'd be surprised if they weren't running it pretty well about quarter of the way through the season. I think by the LSU game, they're probably going to have to be able to run it in order to win the game.
Yeah, you won't be able to protect the quarterback if you can't.
That's right. But I'd be surprised if they weren't able to run the ball. He's always figured out a way to do that. Malzahn, that is.
Well, we always thought that they'd have to lean a little bit more on the pass early in the season, kind of the opposite of last season. So that was the case in week 1. If they throw the ball well the first few weeks, that's going to open up the running game. There were no Jets. Getting somebody involved in a jet sweep, getting a healthy Eli Stove maybe back at some point can change that. So we haven't seen the full dynamic of the offense yet either. So I would suspect they'll throw the heck out of the ball early, and that'll open some things up, and the balance will come. But I agree with you guys. I can't imagine it's going to be a season where they're not an effective running team at some point.
Just real quick, going around one more time, what do you guys expect against Alabama State? I mean, it's going to be a blowout. I said that once against about Jacksonville State, but this isn't Jacksonville State.
No.
So people need to calm down, try to make comparisons about in-state FCS teams. Jacksonville State's on another level. But I think going into this game, Auburn's just going to try and run the ball, and work on those kinks. What do you guys think?
I would think so. I would think they'll throw it some, but I would think that this is going to be mostly a running game. And I think we'll see some guys we haven't seen, probably Asa and maybe more Sean Shivers, who they really are high on, and running the ball, and maybe more of Whitlow, and probably not a whole lot of Cam Martin. Just if it goes like expected to. Of course, the only way these games turn into problems is like the Mercer game last year. You go out there and turn it over 5 times, and then all of a sudden it's the fourth quarter and you haven't put the game away. But I just can't imagine that happening in this game. I'd be very surprised. Though Alabama State will have some athletes now. They'll have some guys who can play.
Alabama State, by the way, allowed about 300 yards rushing against Tuskegee this past week. So if Auburn's going to have a big game running the ball, this is it. This is definitely it.
If they get stuff Saturday, then next week we can talk about that there's some issues there somewhere.
Oh, my gosh. Can you imagine the message board if that happens? All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for the Auburn Undercover Roundtable. Thank you so much for joining me. Make sure to go to auburnundercover.com for full coverage as we head down the line and Auburn plays Alabama State. And, of course, the big matchup coming up that a lot of people are already talking about against LSU the Saturday after next. I've been Brandon Marcello. Thanks for joining us.